Hey guys, it's it's that time. It's 5 o'clock, and just getting some dinner ready. Actually, I'm starting to make use my slow cooker a little bit more often. Definitely makes life a little bit easier if you can prepare in advance. And yeah, it's doing some slow cooker cooking and doing a little bit of reading. I don't know if you've ever read an author, Dr. David Hawkins. He wrote a book called Power versus Force. And it was a bit of a heavy read, but just absolutely phenomenal read. So from that one, of course, the next one was the Eye of the Eye. So I'm giving myself an aneurysm, trying to get through it. He's a heavy writer because he's a medical doctor, he's a PhD, he's just a brilliant mind, and he draws in so much information from so many fields of study, from religion to he had one of the largest psychiatric centers and practices in New York City. A brilliant man, but in order to get into him, you got to spend some time. Really, you got to slow down. You got to be focused. You have to be well rested to digest his material, because he's very expansive in how he thinks, and very deep. Which is one of the challenges, of course, we have in this day and age, is that we're in an era of very shallow conversations, very shallow thought processes. We don't critically think anymore. It's Now I remember a while back I wrote a blog post on called the "Asleep at the Potter's Wheel," and I wrote it because I was sitting in Victoria on the island here, and I was having lunch. And I was watching people walk by, and I was just noticing, of course, and it's unmistakable, of course, in this day and age, to see how unhealthy our population has become, but how normal that's appeared. So, and I was just fascinated by just the wide variety of body shapes, but very few of them actually carried their bodies strong and proud. And it's not about people being bodybuilding type athletes. It's not about the extreme athlete. It wasn't what I was referring to, but just a general state of health. And it wasn't very apparent in the vast majority of people. So I wrote this blog post called "Asleep at the Potter's Wheel," and really the reference was that historically, when we looked at the world long before, I guess, the Industrial Revolution, long before we had machines doing lots of work, long before the information age, we had to work physically hard. We had to do physical manual labor, which was the exercise we needed to keep our body strong. When I grew up, our food we grew. We had about an acre of garden. We didn't call it organic. It was simply food. It was organic by today's standards. So if you're thinking that if you have classified food as organic and food as non-organic, then what is the non-organic food? Is it even food at all? So the whole idea and the illustration, the reason why I use the idea of a potter was that if you look at a potter, what does a potter do with his hands? He takes clay, right, and he takes the clay and he forms it, and he forms the clay in these beautiful shapes. And what gives clay its beautiful color? Well, minerals. Minerals gives clay the gorgeous colors you'll see in a lot of those beautiful pieces of work. So our environment was the potter. Our environment historically was the potter that actually molded the clay of our bones, right? Molded the clay of our internal organs, molded the clay of our musculature. And we don't have the potter anymore, right? It doesn't exist anywhere. We don't have that physical stressor, this multi-planar push, pull, press, lift. The farm type lifestyle doesn't exist in the vast majority of the world. So there's no more potter. So who's shaping the clay? Well, nothing really. A little bit of gravity, right? The occasional workout, maybe a little bit of activity to do. People often say, "Well, I walk every day." And I said, unless you're 95, I don't consider that exercise, because walking is a form of locomotion. You should be able to walk. That is the least you should be able to do. Plus, you should be able to defecate. You should be able to breathe. Your heart should be beating, right? Those are baseline life markers, as far as I'm concerned. Unless you're an older person, right? Because we were designed to be these physical, amazing creatures, and yet we've lowered the bar so everybody seems to fit under it, and it really concerns me, because each generation, of course, tends to, each generation passes on a bit of the deficiencies in what we've created in this generation. So the generation, behind me, my parents and their behaviors, their attitudes, their dietary behavior actually affects our genetic code, and it affects the generation coming up. There's a young lady who cuts my hair, and I was talking about some of the genetic research I was looking at, and it was stating that, if a mother, for example, has a very poor dietary habits while she's bearing a child, especially with let's say a very high carbohydrate, very refined carbohydrate diet, the tendency for a child to become obese is actually heightened immeasurably, because those high levels of uncontrolled insulin in the body really affects the fetus, and the fetus will actually have a tendency to produce more fat cells than normal. So we're setting our children up for obesity because of our dietary behavior. And yet people claim it's my life, it's my it's none of your business, it's my life, right? I can do what I want. But we're part of it. We're part of an ecosystem. We can't be insular, because it just doesn't work that way. Everything we do affects somebody else. So getting back to my hairdresser, this young lady, she's a type 1 diabetic, or type 1.5, which means she's on the cusp of being type 1. Well, guess what her father is? He's a type 2 diabetic. Is it reasonable to assume that his lifestyle behaviors affected the genetic code and the way what he gave to his daughter in the form of a health potential, and his daughter now became a type 1 diabetic? We're so defensive about our health, and yet it's such a massive responsibility that the world doesn't seem to get. And we look at the complexity of it, but it's not that complex. I told somebody, I've said this numerous times, and if you know me, if you spoke with me, you've heard it before. I said, if I shoved a gun in your face and said, tell me exactly what you need to do to rectify the course of your life right now, or otherwise I'll put your brain on that wall. Man, we know. We can't say we don't know what to do, right? We can't say we don't have time. We can't say it's not possible. None of those statements are accurate. I mean, we're overwhelmed for sure. We're tired, we're frustrated, we're being pulled in 9 different directions. But it doesn't mean we don't know, because deep down, we have the access to the information. It just, we seem to lack the motivation or the internal directive to actually act upon it. And I really feel for people, because it's, I've been a geek at this for years. I've been studying at this for 23 years, but I came up from a very, very bad lifestyle. And so I understand the transition. But I also understand, and of course it goes along with the comment, if it's to be, it's up to me. I've got to ask the questions. I have to ask for help. I got to seek assistance, and I keep going. As Tony Robbins says, you keep going until what? Until you figure it out, all right? Until you get the answer. And guess what? I've been through various doctors, and a lot of them just, they're not interested in what I'm interested in. They're not willing to help me take my health to the next level. Unless I got something growing out of the side of my face, they're not interested in having a conversation with me, right? Which is really, I find very challenging. So I keep exploring, because I want to improve upon my health. I want to improve. I created so much damage to my health when I was in that formative stages of being just an idiot in the nightclub industry. I really did a lot of damage to my metabolic health, and I'm still paying for it this day and age. So it's just, again, we're in this really amazing point in time in our history that we actually have access to a lot of incredible information. One of my great fascinations now is intermittent fasting, and I'm a huge fan. I mean, I was introduced to it. I started working in natural health care probably 20 years ago. I worked as a chartered herbalist and a biokinesiologist, and that was my framework of study. And of course, we were introduced to a variety of different cleanses: colon cleanses, liver cleanses, kidney cleanses, what have you. But just about 7 years ago, when I got introduced to the whole concept of intermittent fasting, it was pretty interesting. And I was in a metabolically defunct state. I was in good shape. I presented well as a physique athlete, but I wasn't doing good at all. And when somebody introduced to me the concept that what was occurring is that I had a moderately high calorie diet, which is all very healthy, very clean, but the nutritional levels were far too low to support the demands I was putting on my body day to day. So for example, I use the illustration, just imagine if you're $2 million in debt, and I come up and says, listen, I know you're $2 million in debt. We call it nutritional debt, right? So you had a bad lifestyle for 15 years. So you're $2 million in debt. And then I come up and say, listen, I got a job at the coffee shop. It's going to pay $8 an hour. You work 7 days a week. Oven's ready. You can work 7 days a week, and you'll make $1,800 a month. So $1,800 a month. What will that do to a $2 million debt load? Nothing. It won't. It'll barely make a dent in the debt load itself. So nutritionally, we're kind of the same way. If we've had a poor lifestyle over the years, over 15, 20 years, it's not a matter of just eating healthy. And we see the struggles of people having the frustration, saying, I'm trying to eat better, and, I'm eating lots of greens, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and it's just not working. It's because we're still bankrupt. We got good stuff coming in, but our nutritional profile seems to be too low. And I take a lot of supplementation, and I'm a huge proponent, huge advocate for it. I think if you're not supplementing your diet, especially if you're coming off a poor lifestyle, I think you're going to be really challenged to see any success, and if any success you have will be very short term. Again, I've witnessed it over and over again in my career, and in myself as well. But when I looked at, we started looking at bringing up my nutritional profile, the other thing that was actually I found fascinating is that when you looked at the intermittent fasting process, and intermittent fasting has been around for thousands of years. It's not a new idea. It's just what's new is the understanding of how it works. And the cool thing is that it's intermittent fasting. It really sets the body into this beautiful repair stage. So you can go into 12 hours, 24 hours. The research has 48 hours. I've even seen research on. There's a doctor in the States, retired doctor from NASA. He's on a 23-day fast. I'm never going to do that, but it was fascinating to see that he actually could function. But within the let's say if you look at the 24-hour to 48-hour fasting process, there's a process called autophagy that occurs, and I've been following this amazing researcher, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, and she lays it out very, very beautifully. But autophagy is actually when the body gets put into a repair mode because it's not worried about digestion, right? The internal organs are not focusing on processing, digesting, metabolizing your foodstuffs. And autophagy is where we take some of the broken down organelles of the system, right? So so inside of a cell, the organelles, the bits and pieces, the mechanics of it, if they're not working or there's some worn out bits, it'll replace it, right? So that's why we get the big spike in growth hormone during these fasting states. That actually brings up that whole process of self-repair. So we're basically cannibalizing all the old tissue. And when you look at some of the research that they look at in cancer prevention, right? Neurological disorders, you name it, right? It just from using the intermittent fasting protocols. And again, if you go on the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and look at some of the research, they'll point to what some of these fasting protocols are being used for by doctors. And again, it's something that if you have a medical condition, you want to talk to a doctor, obviously, to be monitored on that whole process. But for those of us that are healthy, that have no medical conditions, the fasting process actually works really, really quite well, and it's very safe. It's just a bit of a mind game to get your head around it. I eat a lot of calories. I put a lot of food in my system to sustain my muscle mass and the style of training I do. But I love my fasting days because one, it alleviates a bunch of time for food, right? So I don't have to focus on eating. But it also puts me in this beautiful mental state of clarity because I had this opportunity to really experience my body at a different level. And day 2 of my fast, I'm actually quite euphoric, right? So which means I'm just getting high, right? I'm getting high of body chemicals. But the ability to heal the body. Anti-aging is another process where they look at the intermittent fasting as the anti-aging process. So for athletes, right, especially recreational athletes, which are the hardest people in the world to talk to about anything, because they're and how do I know? Ask me how I know. Because we're so scared to not be training, right? The person that just can't not have a day, they can't just take a day off from running, or they just cannot stop from swimming, or they just can't not go to the gym because they feel like if they don't go to the gym in 24 hours, they'll turn into this big fat buffoon. It's just there's a bit of a psychology thing going on there, I think, with some of us recreational athletes. But taking an athlete and you actually give them time, you give them a 48-hour time frame where you can actually get them to stop training and put the body in this repair state. It's extraordinary. You think about the redevelopment and the strengthening of connective tissue, right? The rebuilding and strengthening of metabolic processes. Like the body actually needs a chance to recover because our whole life is full of stressors. Wouldn't you agree, right? Eating food is a stressor, right? It creates the oxidative stress in the body. Exercise is a stressor, right? Being under ultraviolet light is a stressor, right? Exercise is a stressor, right? Being self-employed, being an employee, going to school, being in relationships, having children. It's a stressor, man. All this stuff's coming at us, and yet we don't take the time to really understand how to recover. We try to rationalize, we try to adapt, but we don't actually try to do the only thing that truly is going to give us peace of mind, longevity, and health is we don't know how to recover. We don't take the time. We're freaked out, right? We're so wired up, we're freaked out to even slow down at all. So it's, so this whole process of actually backing off, it's, spending 24 hours or 48 hours if you can manage it into this fasting state. One, the body, within the first 24 hours, of course, the body's chewing through all the sugar stores. But because there's so much growth hormone that's been secreted in the system, because of this being put in a state of autophagy, that muscle tissue is being spared. So you can't lose your muscle, which is beautiful, right? So for those athletes who are worried about losing muscle mass, I maintain a body mass of about 100 kilos, and I fast, on a fairly regular basis and in different ways. And I've never lost my muscle mass. I'm stronger and better shape now at 51 than I was 20 years ago. So, nutrition really is, and nutrition and the science around it, it's a really kind of cool thing to play around with. And of course, the other big point for me when I look at this fasting process is that there's also research from the Salk Institute that's looking at eating times, right? So suggesting past 7 p.m., if you can manage it, you don't eat past 7 o'clock, ever. And of course, they're saying, if you can do it 4 or 5 days at a 7, you're going to see significant health benefits. And this is from the Salk Institute, I think it's in San Diego. But they look at circadian rhythms and suggesting that because our stomach actually secretes melatonin, our pancreas has receptor sites for melatonin, so which leads them to believe that, of course, after when the sun starts going down at dusk, when our brain starts secreting melatonin in preparation to put us to sleep for that beautiful recovery, if we ever sleep. I don't know about you, but I don't sleep very well. But later on in the day, we secrete less insulin, and our body becomes is more challenged to deal with digestion, especially carbohydrate metabolism. So those people struggling with weight, you may want to look at intermittent, not only using the intermittent protocol for fasting, which is powerful and I highly suggest it, but also the eating windows of opportunity, which is at 12-hour windows. So if my first meal was at 7 a.m., ideally I'm not eating past 7 o'clock at night most days of the week if I can manage it. So there's all sorts of kind of cool stuff out there. And I know my last video, I'm talking about variability. Even bad plan's a plan. You're not going to know. There's no absolute way to say for sure, 100% certainty that moving forward on any given path is going to work 100%. It's just not that. It's not that simple. Even a medical specialist is guessing, right? He's an 18% chance of guessing the right thing. Sorry, phone's being weird here. So it's because it's so subjective. It's just really important not to put all your hopes and dreams in one thing, but just say, okay, listen, I'm going to take one variable, as I suggested before. And if diet is the variable, some simple things we can look at controlling. One is the timing, right? So making sure that we're timing our meals so that we always have breakfast. Breakfast is a powerful indicator of success if you can manage breakfast. But eating in these 3 to 4 hour segments, and that, of course, how many times have you heard that? Right? You have to have heard it, right? 1,000,000 times. How many are actually employing it? Right? Well, not very many, right? Well, you know better. Why aren't you doing better, right? So, start doing the obvious things, and that's a very simple thing to do. The second part, once you start eating every 3 or 4 hours, of course, you're going to start looking at food combining. I try never to eat a carbohydrate by itself, right? So carbohydrates are all your plant foods, right? Your vegetables, your fruits, and of course your grains. So I never eat a carbohydrate by itself because it actually messes with my blood sugar. Throws my blood sugar levels up too high. But also I eat very little starch. So I eat very little rice, breads, pastas, that sort of thing. Eat very, very little of it. And that constitutes maybe 10% of my diet in total. Lots of fats, lots of proteins, lots of crunchy leafy vegetables. And that actually serves me quite well. So I'm eating every 3 or 4 hours. I'm also having really good food combinations. I'm very, very consistent on that. I try to use those eating windows of opportunity, so I try to stay within that 12-hour window at least 4 or 5 days at a 7. So I'm really making that happen. And then of course I supplement my diet with various nutraceuticals because I need to, right? And I think, you know, and again, I think you recognize when you look outside that most people that have really good success with their health, they don't do it just by eating vegetables. They do it by supplementing supplementing a healthy diet, right? Not just living on supplements, not just try to live off vegetables, but actually having a great combination of both, which is really important in this day and age. You know, again, it's just, there's so much information out there. But I remember Tony Robbins said something years ago. He said, success leaves clues, right? So look at people that are successful in the area that you want to be successful in, and then inquire, right? You know, inquire, you know, does there a particular approach, will that suit my lifestyle? Is it easy to do? Will it suit my lifestyle? You know, is it within my realm of possibility? And go seek those people out. You know, and the reason why I do these little Facebook Live feeds is that I get a lot of questions coming through my inbox. I train people online. And I feel for the public, right? It can be a very confusing landscape. But I think, again, remember, success leaves clues, right? And I'm a 51-year-old male bodybuilder, right, who's in better shape now than it was 20 years ago. Well, there's something I'm doing, and there's something that I'm reading and understanding, and I'm looking at the researchers out there that have this tremendous amount of wealth of knowledge. You know, they're more intelligent than they'll forget more than I'll ever know in my lifetime. So I'm following the experts. I'm watching them uncover the magnificent part of how to be an amazing human being, right? Whether it's a psychology, like the incredible authors like Dr. David Hawkins, to some of these clinical researchers like Dr. Rhonda Patrick, you know, Dr. Michael Colgan, again, an incredible guy, Dr. Bill Andrews. Like the list goes on and on. It's just there's such a brain trust out there. All we're lacking really is a little bit of faith, a little bit of action, right? And a little bit of stick-to-itiveness, as my father used to say. You got to stick to it until something happens, right? And at the end of the day, like I said, success leaves clues. So look around for some clues in your environment. And I think you'll find that what you're looking for is very close. Get over your skepticism, right? Get over your concern about looking like a fool. You know, it's every time I do one of these things, I run the risk, or I open myself up to ridicule and criticism. I don't care, right? because we know the process. There is no 100% absolute way to get this thing done. It's all about variability. But it's just, you know, but even a bad plan is a plan. So find a path that you can follow. Find something that resonates with you. Find somebody who resonates with you. Stick on that path and stay there until something happens. All right, guys, I gotta go. I got dinner to get ready here. Having an extraordinary weekend, and yeah, thanks for hanging out. It's always appreciated.